back of the respective wild cards, but the Yankees have lost 6 in a row. They lost 8-3 to the Red Sox last night. Johnny Brito got blew up. Only went 2 1/3, 9 hits, 7 runs, 6 earned, 1 strikeout. Before that, the Yankees were on the road, got swept by the Atlanta Braves. Finally, you guys get to feel the wrath of that Atlanta team, or the Yankees get to feel the wrath of that Atlanta Braves team. And it's just been a rough stretch this whole season. They're 16-62 right now. And they stayed put at the deadline. They didn't really no real additions of note, no real subtractions either. And you see yourself now on August 19th, 7 games back of the American League wild card. As of right now, this Yankee season has been a failure, and I don't think it's wrong to put it that way when you look at where they are in the standings and who's producing, who hasn't on this team. Because if you go beyond Aaron Judge, and he's missed time being injured too, and Garrett Cole, especially offensively, this Yankees team is bad, and they've struggled mightily so far this season.
Yeah, on the verge of their first losing season in more than 3 decades now. This is not Yankee baseball. This is not the Yankee brand of baseball, Nick, and it's very frustrating around this town because you had such high expectations, and I think for both teams that was evident going into the year. Injuries certainly plagued the Yankees. Now, that's usually a Mets problem, right? Usually they have these problems that their pitchers that go down the middle of the year, the medical staff doesn't know what they're doing. Now that's the Yankees' fault. And it's not to the fault of their medical staff. It's to the fault of these players who they signed who haven't seen the field. Frankie Montas. Where is Frankie Montas? Where is Rodon? Where are these guys? You have Cole going out there tonight. Great. You need that. You need Garrett Cole to do your thing. He's the showstopper. But he might get traded next year. I don't know. These are things that you have to look. The Yankees brass. We talk about the brass, right? The front office, the coaches. Cashman and Boone are a package deal. I've said this for a while. But it looks like Boone's going to be out. Boone's going to be done. And where does that leave you with Cashman? Running back the same formula year after year after year? It's not what Yankee fans want. Chris, you could tell me otherwise, but I don't see it getting much better.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's August 19th, and the Yankees have one guy with more than 100 hits. That's a problem. That's just, it is. It's just straight up a problem. I mean, when you look at even the pitching splits, I mean, these ERAs, they're just abysmal. I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a care to be had. I mean, obviously, it's way more complex than that in so many different aspects, but I mean, they've won 5 of their last 18 games, guys. Like, we can only make so many excuses for this team, and it really feels like kind of when you have an emotional tie to a team, it does feel like they can have lulls like this throughout the season, and the Yankees are definitely not opposed to that. It feels like with, all the great seasons they've had and, the last half decade, there are stretches that feel like this every single year, just naturally. Like, it will feel like this for at least a couple weeks, but it just seems like the Yankees are just living in this reality now. It seems like this is the Yankees' reality of kind of obscurity, and it's tough to see, especially with such a talented roster. But yeah, as I said, when you have one guy with more than 100 hits and it's August 19th, I'll say it again, that's a problem. And when you haven't won a series since Kansas City, and after that, I don't even know when the last series this Yankee team won, it's a problem. And, yeah, I totally agree with you. They're definitely in dire straits. I don't know how you can just run back Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman next year in good faith, especially with, the fan base maybe as rabid as they've ever been for a change. But, yeah, it seems like dire times for the Pinstripes.
And you think about the success last year. You make it to the ALCS. Yes, you're swept by the Astros, but, it's a very good Houston Astros team. And you think, okay, now we go into the offseason and you can reload and go on to do bigger things in 2023. And whether it's the injuries, whether it's, the people who haven't been injured, when Giancarlo Stanton's been healthy, he's batting down near the interstate at 202 right now. When you have all that money invested in a guy like that who can barely run these days, it's just not a recipe for success. And Chris, you mentioned there's these stretches every year where I think Yankee fans make it seem like the sky is falling, but there'll still be 10, 15 games over 500. At the end of the year, they'll make the playoffs, and then you see what happens from there. This is not that stretch. I think all Yankee fans pretty much are on the same page. This is just what this team is, that it's anemic offensively, and besides Garrett Cole, the starting pitching also not quite there. And I think when it's August 19th and you're 16-62, it's not a slump. This is just who you are as a ball club.
But also, Goose, doesn't it feel like they've been under 500 for like 2 months?
Yeah.
It does, and they just dipped under this week. And
Yeah.
I think partly it's the doom and gloom nature of Yankee fans sometimes when the team isn't necessarily performing up to the meteoric expectations that are set every year. But this team, since Aaron Judge went down way back in June, it's been, you can call that a turning point, but offensively, pitching-wise, it's not New York Yankee baseball. And you think about how good it felt to be in New York last year when the Mets were in a heated division race with the Braves. The Yankees were at the top of the AL East, and both teams, the Yankees won 99 games, the Mets won 101. But both teams get in the postseason, both teams are playing or get home field advantage in the playoffs, and for the tables to turn as much as they have in 1 year, it's just kind of depressing from an outside perspective looking in at New York baseball and this Yankee lineup and how anemic it is right now. Because you have money invested in DJ LeMahieu, you've got money invested in Giancarlo Stanton, and those guys have not produced anything offensively. You're relying on people like Billy McKinney to step into the lineup. 2021 Mets legend, Dan, for that 1 month stretch in May and June.
That's right.
Hit home run against the Diamondbacks in Arizona. But, when you're relying on guys like that to be pieces of this lineup and to carry you through, it's just not a recipe for success.
There's a couple things you touched on that I want to touch on. The Judge thing. If we spun a roulette wheel, I can't sit here and say that the Mets and Yankee seasons would turn out the same way that they did, right? But that's where we are, and that's where we're at, and that's what it is. But you mentioned DJ, you mentioned Stanton. More so Stanton than DJ, but Stanton's contract, both of them actually, very much a lot that they have to get out from under. That's a lot. Now, no team on the open market is going to say, yeah, I'll pay half, unless you're the Mets, but the Mets aren't even going to do it. Hey, I'll pay half a Stanton salary. Yeah, give me him, and I'll give you, 2 prospects. That's not happening. The Yankees are in I could go on the record and say that, the tide has officially turned and that this is a Mets town now like Salicata wants to do, but I'm not going to be doing all that. But I think in terms of the future, the Mets have a brighter future than the Yankees, and it's great. But in terms of the Yankees, right now it's tough. You have a lot of things that are on your plate. And just really quick, you talked about stretches of being bad. The Yankees, 5 straight pennants and went to the World Series up until 1965. Then they won 77 games that year. Then they had a 14-year drought until 1981 when they went to the World Series against the Dodgers and had another drought after that. So if history tends to repeat itself, the Yankees are not in good form for the next couple of years.
We've got a very special caller on the line, WFUV's very own Jack Warner. Is going to weigh in on this Yankee discussion. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good, Nick. Thank you for taking my call. It's always fun seeing you, host Chris. How you doing?
Good to talk to you too.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask real quick was, and I want to say Dan, nice jersey.
Thank you.
But so here's the quick question that I wanted to ask. So you saw yesterday, I think, was a continuation of earlier in the summer, which was the Red Sox. I know this is so cliche of me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. The Red Sox walking all over New York. And yes, this has just been another addition to a disappointing season for the New York Yankees. But the one thing, as much as I can point and laugh as like a Red Sox fan and be like, oh, this is so fun to watch, what I find so interesting about these now 2 full series and first game of another 3-game series that we've seen with Boston is that, I don't think that Boston is that, we've seen New York has had a tough season across the board, yes, but what I'm trying to figure out, and I guess is more my question for this call, is where don't they match up with Boston? Because as much as I can sit here and have fun watching my favorite team, beat up on our rival, I can also sit here and say I'd be absolutely lying to you if I said that Boston was a good team or was a powerhouse team. They're not. So I just don't understand because, there's a lot of jokes on baseball Twitter this year about, the fact that no one could care less about the Sox-Yankees rivalry. And as much as I don't want to get that intense with it, because I do think I'm excited once it hits the calendar and these two teams are playing each other, I would also be lying to you if I said that, it's been giving us the caliber of baseball that we're used to watching between this great rivalry. So I guess the main question I have in the midst of these Yankees struggles is, what has been the deal with their inability to match up with Boston, and what do you think they have to do the rest of this weekend to not lose yet another series? But thank you for taking my call.
We appreciate the call, Jack. I'll tell you exactly where they do not stack up. Look at the first four hitters in the Red Sox lineup. Okay, Verdugo, Devers, Turner, Yoshida. 4 good hitters. 4 major league quality hitters who can hit for power too if they need to, and that's a solid top 4 to have in your lineup. Look at the Yankees' top 4 from last night. Not quite the same. LeMahieu, Judge, Bauers, Stanton. Judge, we all know what Aaron Judge can do. No one's saying Aaron Judge is bad, even though that's been sort of floated around New York Sports Talk Radio recently that maybe Aaron Judge is to blame for this. He's not.
No,
but LeMahieu, disappointing season again. Bauers, Stanton. Bauers is hitting 210, Stanton's hitting 202. That's where they don't match up.
An aspect of that as well is that a guy like Cole, who's just like one of the reasons why we get any sort of W's on the calendar, they absolutely slam him. Anytime he's on the bump against the Red Sox, they just hit the crap out of him.
On the bump today, 105.
Yeah, and Devers is always leading that charge. Devers just seems to just have Cole's international number, home number, mobile number, every number. He's got it.
They have a good mix of old and young guys, and the Yankees are just old.
Yeah, because we've been really just basically trashing on the Yankees for 20 minutes. I'm going to play a little devil's advocate, just kind of the positives of the situation. When you look at these kind of stats, I mean, 2 guys in this lineup have over 3 WARs, which is a very good above average WAR, and one of those guys is Anthony Volpe. He does have a 212 batting average, but I think a lot of that is to blame his earlier kind of woes in the season. So that's definitely a guy I think that hasn't gotten necessarily the fairest shout this year, and I definitely think Volpe's best baseball is way ahead of him. But also a guy like Judge, he's got an above 3 WAR, even with everything that was just said. It seems like he homers every night when he plays, and he's healthy. And Cole, we just talked about, he's a Cy Young candidate who probably will win the AL Cy Young. When you have maybe the best hitter in the league aside from a guy in Anaheim, and then you have probably the best pitcher in the league as well. Those are pieces that you could be excited about. Even if the situation is dire. And then also, the farm system is no, schlub either. We got guys like Jason Dominguez, who we were talking about earlier in studio this morning. And then, also guys like Austin Wells, who, fit positions that we may have holes in, like catcher. And, just some things that you can kind of hang on to as a Yankee fan in a positive sense. Because obviously it's, very much a negative tornado right now.
Yeah, and I think Volpe deserves his flowers. Yes, the batting average isn't quite there, but defensively that foundation is there, and he's a very, very good defensive shortstop. And I think as we go into next year, I think that batting average is only going to come up. He's going to already hit for power, and I think Volpe is going to be the Yankees starting shortstop for a very long time.
And I brought up Glaber earlier to make a point about how bad the rest of the team is, but he does have 122 hits this season. The rest of the team, no one has even 100. So, that's another guy who's really, even with everything else around him not going necessarily well, he's definitely still putting in his work and trying to stay consistent game in and game out.
And we've got another caller on the line. This is Jonah from Virginia. Jonah, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
Good.
Thank you for calling.
So what do you think of this Yankee team? Go ahead.
So my concern with the Yankee team is I'm a Reds fan. So as someone who's seen consistently this season, the Reds call up talent again and again. They called up their number 1 prospect again today, Marte. I've kind of seen how that young injection of energy has kind of picked this team up through slumps. And I think if you look at this Yankees team, they don't really have many hard-hitting prospects. I think the highest they've been on Pipeline's rankings for farm systems has been 13. So do you think that has anything to do with it, where they're just not getting those young prospects and just spending all this money on players who are MLB ready but kind of towards the tail end of their careers, like Donaldson, where they're overpaying and not investing in prospects as much? Do you think that has anything to do with their struggles this year?
Yeah, thanks for the call, Jonah. I think it definitely does. I think you hear a lot about Yankee prospects when they're in Double-A or when they're in Single-A, and they get hyped up, and then somewhere along the lines, just the stock begins to fall, whether it's what the Yankees are doing developmentally in the minor leagues, whatever their philosophy is. But it seems like these guys that are hyped up, in the minor leagues, just somewhere along the line, it's the flame kind of goes out and the stock kind of drops. But I think it's definitely a good point when you look at the success that a team like the Cincinnati Reds have had this season. Calling up a guy like Elly De La Cruz just provides that spark of energy. Yes, the Yankees have had that with Anthony Volpe, but it just doesn't feel the same when you're surrounded by people like Stanton and who can barely run, and other old guys who are on these contracts that are, eating alive, your payroll. And I think that's definitely a good point, that there's not quite that same young excitement that other teams have.
Yeah. And Jonah, thank you for the call. And actually, one of my best friends in the whole world is a diehard Reds fan, born and raised in Cincinnati. So I love what you guys are doing in Cincinnati. You guys are definitely looking on the up. And in terms of the Yankees, I think we mentioned it before about the Stanton contract. They're using a lot of their resources in the wrong areas, I think. They're not going the Mets route, and we'll get to them in the next segment. But the Mets are kind of pivoting towards more of the future, more focusing on projections and what are these guys going to turn out to be in scouting. And that takes a lot of time and effort. And if the Yankees are wasting and having all their money curled up in a Stanton contract, or, the Yankees sell out every night. The Steinbrenners want to make money. It's the family-run business. That's their main objective at the end of the day. And I think there's a lot of frustration coming out now that where is this money? Why is it not, they're seeing that, they might have been sold a bill of goods.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like the Yankees go through eras. I mean, the same guy has been at the helm for a long time at this point, so they definitely go through stages in this Cashman kind of era. And they're in one right now similar to after the championships in, the early 2000s, kind of that I would call Giambi era, around the 2005 kind of season, where it was very much just, let's go buy all the superstars and then go try and win as much as we can with as much money as we can spend. And obviously that doesn't work. Not like the Yankees have ever had farm system guys impact championships, Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera, Robinson Cano, Aaron Judge. Nonetheless, I just feel like they're in this mode right now, very much of the superstar, go get them, kind of mantra of the Stanton, LeMahieu, Cole kind of situation. But really, I think in 2016, when they had that, Austin Judge kind of co-debut together where they went back-to-back on home run and Gary Sanchez looked like, Babe Ruth. I think that's the kind of energy and spark that this team kind of needs, and that's kind of what our caller was kind of lending toward. And that was kind of the point I was making with guys like Austin Wells and, even just other minor league pieces like Dominguez just coming up and maybe just even creating a little excitement, even if it doesn't lead to wins. Just a little more fun, I think, can definitely be needed for this Yankee team.
Goes a long way.
Yeah. And before we move on, I want to float this question to you guys. A lot of, Brian Cashman has been in charge of this team since 1998. That's a very long time, and I think there's a large portion of the Yankee fan base that thinks, new ideas are needed at the top. Is that something that you agree with, Dan?
Yes, absolutely. I think this year, you could run back the same thing. What's going to happen, right? It's going to be the same thing this time next year talking about it. I think Boone has to be the one that goes. I'd be surprised if Cashman actually, leaves or gets fired. But, who do you replace him with? I know Derek Jeter is the first name a lot of Yankee fans want to say. There's going to be someone that none of us have ever heard of before if it does go that route. But I rest my case. But, yeah, I think that's the route that they could take.
I think about the Yankees in a similar situation to post-Messi Barcelona, if we're going cross-sport here. Kind of feel like they're very much stuck in their ways running in sand, and the Yankees need their Xavi, their guy with that mentality to bring back really what the ambiance of the championship eras was and just bring it back to almost exactly what it was, kind of what he's doing right now there in Spain. I think they need that. They need someone to really just remind them who they are, the Yankees, and I think they'll get that eventually in the next 2 years.
Is Anthony Volpe Pedri in this comparison? Or is he Gavi?
Gavi. He's Gavi.
I like that.
Think, yeah.
I like that. We go cross sports here on 101. Guys, on the other side of this break, we're going to go across town to Queens, talk about those New York Metropolitans that, although they sold everything off of the trade deadline and threw in the white towel, they've won 5 of 6. They're 7 games back of the wild card. Things are trending up a little bit in Mets land. It's a weird time post-trade deadline when the stars are gone and Jonathan Arauz and Rafael Ortega are getting plate appearances. Woo! But we'll talk about that on the other side of this break.